Today. Hey, Colin.
How's it going?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm doing good. We were just talking earlier, and this is the second time that I've ever been interviewed, the first time on Facebook Live. So I hope I don't screw it up and put my foot in my mouth.
I think you're going to do a great job. And I'm glad that the tables have turned because I was recently on your Tools of the Trade podcast and
Yeah,
you
that's
were
right.
asking me the questions, and now it's my turn. So, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Um, yes, thanks for joining us. So we've been doing these Facebook Live episodes to share with our community and our followers not only the response during COVID-19, but we've been reaching out to females in the industry and leaders in the industry from the various industries that Build a Dream represents to ask them questions about how companies are responding to COVID-19, but also what you're doing to outreach to youth to consider the skilled trades or different career pathways. So why don't we start off with you giving us a brief history about your career path. You're a master electrician. You've also run your own company. So why don't you give us a brief history about your background in the trade and what brought you to starting your own podcast to educate more people about the construction industry?
Yeah, so I'll give you the shorter version because I was asked this question on a podcast a little while ago, and I listened back and I realized that I went on for like 25 minutes about my path. But essentially, when I came out of high school, I wanted to get into the skilled trades because I'd always worked with my hands in high school in shop class, and I love doing that kind of stuff. I knew that I wanted to build, and it was also influenced from my parents and my father in particular saying, once you have a skilled trade in your tool belt, it'll never go away. Like if you learn something, it's useful. You can use it around the house. You can help your friends and family out. As are most industries, they're useful in some things beyond the career itself. But it started there, and I remember the first question I asked was, well, what's the cleanest type of construction and what makes the most money? And he said, oh, you probably want to be an electrician. They can't work in the rain, and it's dangerous, and you have to know math, so they get paid well. And I said, okay, I'm going to try electrical. And that was it for me. I went to BCIT in Burnaby, BC. Breezed through my first year as a pre-apprentice, which I think is a great avenue for anybody looking to get into skilled trades to take. But actually, prior to that, there was another course, and I'm not sure which other colleges or universities offered this type of course, but it was called Trades Discovery. And what it was 6 or 8 weeks, I can't quite remember, where they introduce you to almost every trade that the school has to offer. So I did like cabinetry, I did motorcycle repair, I did automotive repair, I did electrical, carpentry, plumbing, and I think two or three other trades. So you get about a week in each one, and you get to experience it, and you do a little project, and then you write an exam. So that just kind of further pushed me into the electrical trade because I really liked it. And then after my first year, it's hard for first year apprentices to get work. I think that's a problem that we're having industry wide right now is companies don't want to take on the responsibility and the burden of having to train people. They'd rather just hire talented men and women that can be self-starters and go out and do it without having to bring apprentices on, which
Colin, and not to
we get
interrupt.
into. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go
I'm
ahead.
going to interrupt you real quick because I know that the apprenticeship pathway is sometimes confusing for someone that's not familiar with it to understand.
Yeah.
What do you mean by an employer taking you on as an apprentice? And can you define what pre-apprenticeship means to those that are
Yeah.
tuning in?
So there's a couple ways to get involved in the trades. The first way is you just go knock on a company's door and say, I want to be a carpenter. And they say, okay, we'll pay you $15 an hour. Get yourself a hammer and a tool belt, and you start working. And as you start working, if you're for a reputable company, working for a reputable company, you accumulate hours that build towards your apprenticeship. Once you reach a certain amount of hours and complete a certain level of schooling, then you can write an exam and you become ticketed or red seal ticketed. A red seal means you can work across the country. So the second way is for somebody that may be thinking about starting in trades but has no clue what to do. Maybe they're too frightened to pick up a hammer right away, or they don't have any background and they want to get started first. You go to a pre-apprenticeship, And that's a longer course for your first year. I can't remember what it is now. I believe it's about 3 months. It could be 4. And you go into a pre-apprenticeship program and you essentially learn like the absolute basics. Like I'm talking when I went in, like what a nut and bolt is, how to tie a knot, like just basics of construction and building. And then from there, after you graduate your first term, you go out and you try and find an apprenticeship. So that's a company that's willing to take you on and train you to be in your specific field, whether that's carpenter or electrician. And it's very hard for people to find that because you're young, you don't know too much, and it's a lot of work to train somebody up. But I always say that the best talent is going to be the talent that you trained yourself, because they're going to do things the way that you want them to. So that's what happened. And then just to fast forward, kind of what happened between my first year and getting ticketed was a lot of travel across Canada. So I worked in oil and gas, I worked in water filtration, and I traveled pretty much from Vancouver right across the country to Ottawa and back, working for an industrial company. At which point I decided that I wanted to come back to Vancouver and finish my apprenticeship. So I wrote my exam, got my ticket. And then the next chapter, which a lot of people don't realize, is if you want to get into a business as a tradesperson, it's not good enough to just become a journey person. You have to actually be a journey person for 1 full year, at which point you have to take another course that makes you a master. So that's master electrician, master carpenter, master plumber. And I believe that word master is adopted across Canada now. In BC, it used to be called FSR, which is a field safety representative, but it's the same thing. So once you get that designation and you go through that schooling and take that exam, that gives you a ticket that allows you to pull a permit. And that permit is what allows you to complete work over the table. So that's kind of the barrier to entry, right? Which is why you see underground economies develop, because you don't have to go to school, you don't pull permits, you just open up shop and you start doing work on the side. So that's the way I got into starting my own company. Was a friend of mine that I was working with and myself, we were working in an industrial potash mine in Saskatoon. And I said to him, you know, we got to start a company. We're too in sync. We got to do this. We ended up doing a bit of traveling together. And then after that, we came back to Vancouver and started a small electrical contracting company, which was building houses, small restaurants, commercial spaces. And that's what we specialized in. And that lasted for about 5 years. But the next chapter in that whole story is working in construction and realizing that there wasn't a lot of resources for contractors. And I was an avid podcast listener, but you know, I was getting sick of listening to guys in the Silicon Valley talk about their rich friends and these medical hacks that they're doing to make their bodies fitter and better and stronger. It's like, how come there's nothing to like pump up the construction industry? I just couldn't find, there's no leaders. There's nobody that I was looking up to. There's no books I wanted to read. Like there's nothing. You go on YouTube, you type in like construction leaders. Like, I don't even know if you're going to find anything. It's kind of crazy actually. So that was in the back of my mind. Like, I really hope that somebody steps up and starts a platform to, you know, show some leadership in the industry to help motivate young people to get interested and to just, you know, help the industry out in general, because there's a lack of resources. And most people know that construction is almost last in adopting technology and being forward thinking and changing from the old school mentality in all industries. So from there, I had a moment where I decided that I wanted some larger and more challenging opportunities, which is what brought me to Toronto. I knew that there was a ton of construction going on here, and the companies were a little bit more serious and a bit larger scale, and they were doing some of the work that I'd never done before. So to kind of round out my career, I decided I've owned a business. I've been a foreman. I've been a general foreman. I've been an electrician, but I've never been a project manager. So I think that I need to go acquire that skill. And that's where I am currently today. And when I segued out of entrepreneurship into project management, there is still a high demand on your time, because those projects become your baby and then you run it like it's your own company. So you're still busy. But I had more spare time than I would have had as an entrepreneur. And that's when I decided to have conversations with people who I looked up to in the industry, like we're having here, and recording those conversations to try and distribute them to give back to construction, which is where I am now. So project manager by day, podcaster by nights and weekends, and trying to just do as much good as I can for the industry, because I think it needs a lot of help. And I think that it's an amazing opportunity for everybody to get into. Men, women, kids. Kids can get into it at a young age. I know high schools are really pushing to get kids in earlier and earlier, and I think it's a great avenue. So I just I want to see how far I can build things up and just help out, more or less.
I think it's phenomenal, your career journey. And it's something that we definitely highlight at Build a Dream when we're talking to parents and youth about the pathways within the skilled trades. And you highlight it so perfectly by talking about going in, getting your ticket, then becoming a master electrician, traveling across Canada, starting your own company, to then only move to Toronto, become a project manager, develop more skills, and then launch your own podcast for the industry. And I think that that's what we're trying to encourage collectively when we're trying to highlight and promote opportunities within the skilled trades, that there's this conception that's out there that they're just dirty, low skill, low paying positions. Yet you're a perfect example of a leader within the industry that's not only really successful, but has had so many different pathways. So what advice do you have for youth that have never considered the skilled trades, that may be questioning if this is a path for them? How can they explore it?
So I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and I think people, like you said, there's a misconception, and that misconception is when they drive past a big hole in the ground in the downtown core of a city and they see a bunch of guys stuck in a concrete pit, that's what construction is. And don't get me wrong, those men and those women that are in those really tough jobs, they're there potentially for a reason. Maybe that's just the card that life has dealt them, and that's where they ended up. And that's fine. And we need those people just as much as they need us. And I don't think that there's necessarily a hierarchy in construction. I think everybody's across the board is a cog in the wheel to get a project built, whether it's a concrete finisher, an electrician, or the project manager. We all have to work collectively. So the only reason there's a hierarchy at all in construction is because somebody has to call the shots and make some of the tough decisions. And there has to be leaders. But other than that, in terms of trades, it just depends on, like you mentioned, how dirty you want to get. There is those types of jobs. They do pay well as well. They are labor intensive. They are dirty. But there also is the other side of construction, which is the management side, which is being a foreman or a general foreman or a superintendent. So somebody that has proven themselves to be a leader in their trade and is capable of handling a crew of people to execute on a job. And depending where you are, if you're a foreman, you have maybe, I think it's 8 to 10 guys max. General foreman will be looking after a couple of foremen, and then a superintendent oversees all of the general foremen. And then from there, you have the project managers, and the project managers are basically at the center of the entire job site. So if you picture construction job as a wheel, the project manager is just simply in the middle, being the bridge between what the client wants and what's being built. So we're in charge of making sure that we have the correct drawings on site for the people that are building whatever we're putting in place, and that all the specs are ironed out. So we're just basically the go-between. We're the ones that are organizing everything in the background for the men and women to execute on. And so when I look back at construction, there was a part of me when I was building with my hands that wanted to be in a more leadership office role like I am now. And now that I'm there, there's a part of me that wishes I was still in the field building with my hands. And I think that that's just something that's inside you. If you're very detail oriented and you want to dig into a set of drawings and be able to turn like literally a pile of dirt into a massive building or a massive project of some kind, that's what construction is. Like, you're literally going from nothing to somebody with an idea saying, why don't we put a 60-story building here that has state-of-the-art automation, and we're going to have Google and Amazon live inside this building. And people think maybe they would rather work for Google or Amazon, but I would rather build the building that these people have to work in. And the way that construction is these days. There's so much technology, and it's very rewarding to be able to say, we took a pile of dirt in downtown Toronto, and now there's a 60-story tower there that's generating billions of dollars in revenue for the Canadian economy because we put that building in place. Or, that person now has a home to live in because we built their house, and it's got all this awesome technology, and it's healthy and it's smart for these people. So construction has the work with your hands, build, the building aspect of it. And then it's also got the management aspect. And then obviously from there, just like any other company, if you work for a large enough organization, there's CEOs, there's CFOs, there's VPs, there's directors, there's project directors, there's project managers. That's no different than an IT company. It's no different than a tech company. It's no different than PwC or KPMG or any of these other organizations. There's partners and there's billion-dollar decisions being made. So if you think that you're going to sacrifice that corporate atmosphere being in construction, it's there if you want it. And we need those people. And right now, those opportunities are bursting open because the baby boomers, they're in those positions and they're on their way out. 10, 15 years, we're going to lose, 40%. So, there's just going to be all of these positions opening up. So now is the time to, either get into the trade itself or get into engineering, or just seriously picking up project management as a skill. Like, you can literally take project management as a course, whether that's a PMP or whether that's at U of T or anywhere else that offers a PM program. Go through it for a couple of years, and you can be making a 6-figure salary on a construction job site.
There's so many things that you highlighted during that description that I want to just pick a little bit more, or ask you a little bit more questions. First off, the pride that a tradesperson feels when they work on a job site or work on a product that is useful for others. We found that in speaking to young women, oftentimes when they're thinking of their future career pathway, because of the underrepresentation of women in these industries, oftentimes young women are talking about more nurturing roles. So they want to become a teacher, a nurse, areas where they feel that they're helping communities. But you highlighted some really valuable ways that tradespeople help communities. First, it's building economies. Secondly, it's building homes and job sites where companies like Google and Amazon have a place to work. What other ways do you feel tradespeople help communities?
Tradespeople, like, if you think of what a community planner does, right? They're the one that will look back and say, this is what our city should look like. But, the person that's rolling out the grass in the park, and the guy that's putting the concrete in the parking lot, and, the girl that's painting the lines on the road, and all the people that make it come together. Like, I don't think that you can go anywhere in your city. Okay, you can go up into the forest and you can go hike. You can go hike in the mountains and you won't see anybody. And that's man, or that's Mother Nature. Mother Nature's made that playground for you. But anything else that you enjoy on a day-to-day basis was built by a construction professional. Literally everything. Even your computer you're using right now, it wasn't built by a construction professional, but the warehouse that it was built in was. So as much as you can say that about a lot of industries, I think that, like, construction is literally the industry that puts a roof over everybody's head.
Well, interestingly enough, even if we look at the pandemic and COVID-19, a lot of the essential services are tradespeople. Like, manufacturing industries right now, companies are the ones that are developing the ventilators and the masks, mass production to support the healthcare workers. Construction has been deemed an essential service for the last couple of weeks, and I see that continuing for the near future. So we look at what's building our economy right now and building our communities and keeping them safe. And part of those roles, while healthcare providers play a significant, valuable role, so do tradespeople. And I'm hoping that after the pandemic is over, we're hoping for the soonest timeline, that we start looking at and valuing tradespeople in a greater light. And I'm hoping that this is going to help break down the stereotypes that have been so long in people's minds about what a tradesperson actually does and their value in society. Yeah,
that's I spoke to a gentleman by the name of TJ Snowden from Snowden Construction on a new segment I'm releasing this week called the Monthly Toolbox Talk. And when we were talking, obviously, as much as you want to stay away from the conversation of COVID these days, you can't help but talk about it. So we get into it a little bit. And he said, he said something that really reframed this for me, and I hope that more people catch this reframe. And my question to everybody else is, how can we keep the momentum, like you mentioned? But that reframe was essentially, forever, construction has been trying to get the voice it needs to be shown as essential, like for people to wake up and realize what we do every day. Without us, things would fall apart. And now, for the first time ever in construction's history, I mean, maybe not ever, let's say maybe during war times when there was a lot of stuff being produced, it was a similar situation, like World War II and so on. But now is kind of the first modern day chance for construction to get recognized. The government has literally said everybody else stays home except frontline healthcare professionals, construction workers, and the other small list of essential services, which are basically our day-to-day needs, like groceries and pharmaceuticals and all that kind of stuff. So it's the first time that we've been openly acknowledged as essential, as the backbone of the economy. And as much as a lot of us are conflicted as to whether or not we should go to work, risk getting laid off, and potentially getting sick and coming home with potentially catching COVID and bringing it into our homes, there's a lot of us that are still taking pride in knowing that we are delivering these projects to people, and that it is in fact essential. So that's a positive reframe, but also just a kind of a snapshot of the rock and the hard place that we're in between as construction professionals right now.
And you are correct. I know it's difficult to not talk about COVID-19 and trying to look at the positive side of what's going on. But I do think when it comes to the work that we're both doing in highlighting the career pathways in the skilled trades and in construction, what a good time for us to really show the pride and the value of construction, the construction industry, in a time that the entire world is struggling to keep up with all the changes that are happening and the health risks that are occurring. Mm-hmm. But you talked about your podcast. You're introducing a new episode, the toolbox tips. Talk to me a little bit more about your podcast. I had the chance to do an interview with you. It's where we first met. And I'd like to think we've become friends since then and have been supporting each other's career goals. Tell me a little bit more about your podcast. Who was probably the most fascinating or coolest person you've chatted with, and what are the goals for your podcast in the coming months?
Yeah, I see some questions popping up here too, and I have some answers for those. So hang tight. But so the podcast, like I mentioned, it started to be a resource for the construction industry, and I almost feel like I should be apologizing, because I feel as though my interviewing skills and just my comfort in front of a camera and a microphone has like accelerated since we spoke last time. So I probably did you a disservice.
That's okay.
But it's the podcast. I keep thinking every single time I get off of an episode of speaking with somebody who's a leader in the construction industry, I get this huge surge of energy. And I just I walk out of these four walls that I podcast in, and I go see my wife, and she's like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, "Oh, I just talked to this amazing person. Like, they had so much good insight." And she's just like, "Yeah, okay, great. Sounds good." But I didn't expect it to be like this. I didn't expect to be able to have these conversations and to be able to get all of this advice from these people. And all I'm doing is asking people the questions I would want to ask them anyways, because I'm an inquisitive person about the industry and about business, and recording it and distributing that to others. And so I had no goals in the beginning except to record 10 episodes, because the statistical average is that podcasts fail before their 10th episode is released, because it's more work than people think. And so I recorded 10, and my goal is to record 10 and then go live after the 10th one's recorded, because I want to stockpile everything. So I'm not like in a mad rush, like I release one episode and then I don't talk to anybody for a couple months. Mm-hmm. And then since then, it's just started to pick up speed. So along with my standard long form interviews, which I've now knocked down to try and keep within 45 minutes to an hour, and that is with all walks of construction life. I like to specifically go after those that have become very successful. And what I mean by that is they've developed an opinion in the industry. So although I talk to people that are more junior in their careers, I like to talk to people that are more senior because they've been in the industry long enough and they've been beaten down hard enough and learned enough to be able to give you some great advice. And there's a gentleman that I recently had on named Brian Kaplan, and he says, life's too short to learn from your own mistakes. And I think that there's some value in that. If you can shortcut 5 or 10 mistakes by hearing what somebody else went through, or that one time on this project, or that one time this risk, we didn't identify it and you caught it and you saved millions of dollars or something like that. I think there's huge value in that. So I'm trying to continue to grow my audience as well as my guest list for the long form interviews. And then the monthly Toolbox Talk is another segment that I have put together, which is essentially more current information. So with speaking to a standard, in a standard podcast, I'm typically asking questions like, how did you get started? What happened when you got out of high school? What was your journey like? And that's more past tense. Like, what did you do before to get here? So with the Toolbox Talk, I found most people don't have an hour to speak to me over a podcast or they're intimidated by it. Most people don't have an hour to listen. And most of the time it's past tense. So what the purpose of the monthly Toolbox Talk is to be able to highlight a broader range of guests from first-year apprentices right up to small business owners and everything in between. Catch them for 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes a little longer, to ask them current questions to get a day in the life. What does a day in the life of that person look like? Maybe it's what is a day in the life of a small electrical business owner? That's going to be the first episode coming out. What does a day in the life of a first-year apprentice look like? Like getting the insights into their industries. And then also another piece to that is to try and plug these companies. So I'm also asking them for all of their contact information and what opportunities they have available, and trying to broadcast that message saying, hey, so-and-so from Victoria is looking for apprentices in their small electrical contractor. If you like what this guy had to say, maybe you want to apply, and just seeing where that goes. So I'm trying to provide opportunities and also give that lens into the industry so that people that are thinking about getting into a specific role can hear from everybody instead of just the CEO or the guy that's been doing it for 40 years. They can hear from the men, women, and everybody in between that's been there, done that just recently. Like, what was it just like for you? You just wrote your first year exam. Was it hard? What was that like for you? How was the process? Do you still want to be in that trade? And just trying to really get that current worldview of what's going on in their life.
Just saw comment coming through. I was like really deep in thought listening to you.
Yeah, I'm getting told we need to smile more.
I know. No, I think she's telling me to smile. You look very serious. Thanks, April. April is a host on at our local radio station, AM 800. So,
so she's hiding, but she's not on camera usually.
No, she's usually on the radio. So. I love the day in the life, and I think that it's really important for us to paint a picture of what it's like for people in the industry, because even if you think of the traditional pathways that people are taking or have taken, you look at all the TV episodes and movies and shows that are popular. They showcase doctors, lawyers, all the typical career pathways, but it's hard to, and then like the tech industry does a really good job in showcasing what it's like working in the tech industry. Yet we've talked in the past that there's not many documentaries or movies that really truly highlight the construction sector or this other sectors like manufacturing or automotive. So I love that you're launching a day in the life. I think that's going to be a really valuable resource. What I'm finding in leading Build a Dream, the construction industry is responding really well to promoting more women in the industry. And actually 3 of our top sponsors and corporate partners are from the construction sector. So we have Ellis Dawn, who's a great partner of ours. The Carpenters Union, I just interviewed one of their apprentices on Friday, Delaney Krieger, who I feel you've had a chat with as well. Yep. And CUSW you recently came on board as a corporate sponsor for us to highlight more of their female apprentices and journey person to talk about their career pathway. And you and I chatted on Tools of the Trade about women in the industry. And I'm wondering what you've been finding has shifted and changed since you became an apprentice, and how you've seen women have progressed, and how has the industry shifted to support more women within the industry.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think it's important. I think that my goal with my podcast is to be very progressive, which is not something that you would think from a stereotypical construction worker, to be progressive and forward thinking. So I'm trying to beat that drum as well. I've noticed for sure. So I came from like typical hard knocks construction. I'm used to getting yelled at. You know, I'm just thinking back to the first general foreman I ever worked for. His name was Jerry Lafort. I love the guy to death. But he used to just ride me, and you can't, like, that doesn't, it's not cool anymore. You know what I mean? It doesn't work like that. Like those old school tactics, although I'm grateful for them, I don't think I would have learned to have the backbone I do in construction if it wasn't for him. So I think that you have to allow that to come through in small ways sometimes. But for the most part, we've stepped away from that. And, you know, I remember when I was an apprentice, there was quite a few incidents with one female in particular on one of our job sites, actually two. And I won't go into detail just because I don't want to go there, but it was tough seeing what these women had to go through, being around a bunch of men on a job site. And that was an eye opener for me to see it firsthand. And I think I said this before when I was on your podcast, a lot of us get wrapped up in the boys club banter, and you fall into becoming the stereotype that you probably don't agree with. Like you may be saying things or acting in a certain way that you don't even realize is hurtful to those people around you. You fall into that mindset because that's, typically it has been the boys club. It has, you're getting together with the boys, you're up at 6 o'clock, working really hard, drinking coffee all day. And then you're going for beers after work with the guys. Like that was construction for a long time. And not to say that needs to change, but it's just the way people act in construction when there's other people in the room needs to change, so that everybody feels comfortable and everybody feels like they can work together on the project. So I've seen definitely a lot more women in leadership roles in construction since I was an apprentice. That's something I noticed for sure. Even on the job sites I'm on now, the company that I work for now, we're promoting a lot from within. There's a huge focus on that. And I think what you've mentioned before is, everybody wants to solve this like labor crisis, and everybody wants to hire the best person for their company, but we're only going to look at men. Like, how is that getting anywhere? Like, you have to look at the whole population. I don't care what your skin color is, or, if you have long hair or not. Like, that doesn't matter to me. If you can do the job, if you're the one for the job, that's what should matter most. And as you mentioned before, the diversity in the workplace is so important for having those alternative opinions. And for any men that may be listening to this, like, just think about the different opinions you may have with your wife and how many things you probably learned from her. And think about your daughters and your, if your daughter was to go in construction, how would you want people to act around her? And I think it's important that we make those changes to be inclusive, and not to the point where you're like, okay, everybody shut up, like, somebody's coming. It's not like that. Like, you need to start being the change that you want to see throughout the job site. And that starts with you. If you want to have that change in the workplace, you have to step up and be a leader and champion that change.
And that's truly what I loved about our conversation, is your openness and how encouraged you were to bringing light to the underrepresentation of women in the industry. And I do feel that we need more male champions that speak the truth about how it was and what they hope to change and shift for the industry. And you said it perfectly. Women are not looking for special treatment on the job site. They're looking for respect. And that's across all the industries where we're trying to get more women to go into these pathways. Is oftentimes, we'll get asked, do you expect us to change the qualifications or the expectations for women on our shop floor or on our job site. And I said, it's actually the complete opposite, is treat women as equals within the industry, support them, respect them, and create more inclusive and welcoming environments. And I remember sharing with you an experience that I had not too long ago with someone in the construction industry who made some really difficult accusations of women, talked about the boys club, and also talked about how women are destroying the boys club on the job site. And I remember feeling very disappointed, discouraged, but then also optimistic after speaking to you on your episode about what we can do together collectively to change the industry for more women to succeed on the construction sites, on the manufacturing shop floor, in policing across different fields. So when you highlight the importance of men, you know, really reflecting on how they would want their wives, their mothers, their sisters, their daughters to be treated, I think that makes it more personal and not so much of that's their problem, or, you know, this is just a women's issue. It becomes an issue that we should all be backing because and supporting, because it impacts us all. And the industry is struggling to find enough people, and tapping into the other 50% is so crucial.
Mm-hmm.
Delaney was on the episode with me on Friday, and she says, I love the mention of the boys club banter, which I find is one of the most difficult issues to handle on a job site. What is your advice to women in the trades navigating that barrier? What a great question, Delaney. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'd love to hear from you, Colin.
Yeah, you know what? This one's very tough to answer because unfortunately, if you're dealing with the job site banter, and first of all, you got to realize that if somebody is bantering on the job site and it goes against what you want, what you believe in, or, you know, it's hurtful to your feelings, you're already dealing with somebody that you're not going to get through to. They're closed-minded. So that's the first thing. So the second thing is, if you're going to stick up for yourself and say something in front of a bunch of people, it's going to turn out even worse for you, unfortunately, because you can't get through to a stubborn person like that. It's the second somebody starts having those conversations or saying those things that are hurtful, you realize you're already dealing with somebody that is of a lower mental capacity than you. Let's just say that they're already closed-minded. You're not going to get through to that person no matter what. So I think the first thing is to realize that you should stick up for yourself, but you have to be careful how you fight that battle. I wouldn't go over their head and do it behind their back, but I also wouldn't do it in front of a bunch of people. And I think what you have to do is you have to lead with vulnerability and emotion. And if you're to come up to somebody and say, hey, don't say that to me, like, they're going to get their back up and they're going to defend right to your face, and it's going to be a fight. But if you go in and you pull somebody aside after work or on lunch break and you say, hey, I thought I would just talk to you for a second and let you know that I'm feeling very uncomfortable and upset. How can you contest that? Unless you're a complete jerk, you cannot. Like, what are you going to say to that? Oh, sorry, take your feelings elsewhere. Then that person's going to have a short-lived career. But this, you know, if you lead with that vulnerability and that emotion, and that person has any sense or any heart at all, they're going to take your side and see that that's not right. So I would, you know, you got to be very careful of those situations. I think another thing too is a lot of these people we're dealing with, and I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but I'm going to for a second here, is a lot of the older generation. And unfortunately, just like you're not changing your dad or your grandpa, you're not changing these guys either. And, you know, it's going to be a combined effort for us to push from the bottom up. But then once we've pushed far enough, these people are eventually going to leave. And when I do look on the job sites, I do notice most of the young men and women that are in, let's say, their early 20s to late 30s, they're all pretty progressive and they all get along a lot better than the old guys do. And I'm seeing from my experience over the last, you know, maybe 5 or 10 years, it's typically those older gentlemen that are, you know, still making those comments. And, you know, it's just a matter of time till they're unemployed anyways, because they're going to retire. So, you know, you just got to keep a strong mindset. Of course, if things get wild or it gets too crazy and you're put in a threatening position, that's a different story. You need to go talk to your leader, whether that's HR or whether that's your health and safety department or potentially even the police, depending on how it goes and what type of company you work in. But just from the on the job site perspective, like it's very tough, especially when you're outnumbered. So the best thing you can do is just be vulnerable and pull that person aside and lead with your heart and your emotion, and start with letting them know how you feel. And it'll be a lot better than, raising your hand and putting them up against the wall, because they're going to fight you hard.
And you provided some really great insight about the tips of how someone could deal with the banter on the job sites. But I'm always interested in the broader solution, and how can we get more male champions like yourselves to play a role in championing that change on the job site, so that someone that's entering the field for the first time is already nervous, intimidated, might not have the confidence to be able to go address someone on the job site that's been there for a very long time to say that's inappropriate. How do we get more mentors and advisors like yourself to actually be that change? So if you hear that banter on the job site, as opposed to expecting a new apprentice that's already finding it difficult getting along or building a strong reputation on the job site, how do we get more people like you to speak up on the job site to say this is unacceptable, and that joke was not funny, it was inappropriate, and I don't think it's right that you're using that language, or making some of the other people feel uncomfortable?
Yeah, so obviously we got to first split this up, because you've got small companies and you've got organizations. Small companies, unfortunately, it's going to be tough to get through, because there's no like course of action you can really take. There's probably 5 or 6 people or 10 that work in the whole business. So if you're in that situation, you may want to look elsewhere if you're really stuck. But what I would say is, first thing, if you hear this, or if you happen to hear a conversation with Noor or myself or sometime in the future, realize that you're going to have to be that champion and that leader yourself and step up and step into that role. But I think because not a lot of people are going to do that, and a lot of people would rather just put their head down and go to work and not take on all this extra responsibility and stress and put themselves in those situations. I think it has to come from the organization level. And instead of just saying, okay, we have a health and safety department, we have a people and culture department, and we have a HR department, I think that every apprentice should be given their own mentor when they get into a company. And that's not somebody necessarily it's on the job site, but it's somebody that is responsible to ensure that that person is successful. So that person can have a direct dialogue with that person, and they can be calling back and forth. How was your first day? How was your first week? What are you scared of? What's challenging? How are you being treated? Having that go-between is going to be a big deal, because that person is no longer going to feel alone. I remember what that was like. I remember back when I was in construction, if you're an apprentice, you had a green hard hat. If you were a journeyman, you had a white hard hat. And if you had a green hard hat on, you knew that you were going to be digging holes and pushing the broom around. You're going to get treated like an apprentice. And there's nothing you can do except lean to the other apprentices and formulate your own opinions on how to handle things. So if there's a go-between in an organization where you're given, you should be given, in my opinion, a mentor or a champion within that organization, and that person should be, responsible to a point. Like obviously they're going to check in with you, but they can't make sure you're going to show up for work and everything. You have to meet them halfway. You get there and you put the work in, but they're there to ensure that you're being treated fairly, that the company is giving you everything that you need, and that if you have any questions, you know where to turn. Because I can't remember how many times as an apprentice I had questions about things. You don't really know who to ask, because unfortunately your journeyman or your foreman or your superintendent or your project manager is too busy to deal with you most of the time. And in the office, sometimes they're too hard to get a hold of. But if you had somebody that was checking in with you constantly, that's a different story. So I think organizations need to kind of have that mentorship program. And I know some do, but it's important to really champion that within the company and make sure that these people are well supported throughout their journey.
Mentorship is so key across any career path that you pursue, and it's extremely valuable in an industry that is facing so many different changes and disruption with the environment itself, and encouraging more of a diverse applicant pool, a talent pool that's joining. So definitely when you're mixing those that have been on the job site for 20, 30 years with new apprentices, you're going to face some of those challenges. So for companies that don't have a mentorship program, what's your advice to an apprentice that is willing to seek out a mentor? What steps could they take to go out and seek out their own mentor?
You know what? That's a great question. And I'm going to be honest, I actually don't know.
Okay.
I give my contact information out to everybody, and I've had people contact me to ask me questions, and I love to do that. I love to help give as much advice as I can, but I actually don't know where you can go get good mentorship or leadership. Unfortunately, that's literally how sad it is that there really isn't a place. So I can say for sure, you can go talk to your teachers at your school, your organization, wherever you went to get training. You might have an outlet there. If you're part of a union, you're going to have an outlet at your union. But another way is to also join associations and groups. So there's a lot of organizations out there. I'm more familiar with the ones in BC because that's where I'm from, and I was a member of some of them, but they have under 40 events. So that's opportunities to meet other peers in your industry, go out for drinks, go out for dinner, that type of thing. So I would look for as many of those associations as you can and see what type of youth programs that they have within those organizations. And then also, unfortunately, it's not like looking up to an athlete and saying, I want to be like LeBron James, and watching all of his game footage and then going and shooting free throws on the weekend. So you kind of just have to look within your community and say, is there anybody that whose opinion I trust, that I look up to, that could lend me some help? And the one thing I would say is, every 100% of the shots you don't take, or you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That's like, you have to go chase those opportunities yourself. Just sitting around at home and saying, oh, this industry sucks so much, I don't want to be here anymore, like I'm just not getting any help. Well, unfortunately, you have to get it yourself. And that's how you're going to be able to grow in your career, is by stepping outside of your comfort zone and finding those opportunities and finding those people to partner with, because iron sharpens iron. And if you find like-minded people to help push you in the industry and you create a network, you're going to be very successful.
I think that's great advice. And I was just thinking, like, what we've done at Build a Dream to help support young women in getting into the industry. I find a lot of the female mentors that we showcase at our events, that we meet through our different initiatives that we run. Every female tradeswoman is so open to the idea of mentoring another young woman into the industry. So reach out to organizations like Build a Dream. There's First Robotics. That's a great pathway for those that are just looking to get into it and are still in high school. And if you are in the industry, the feedback you gave about joining associations, or even listening to your Tools of the Trade podcast, or others, or following other similar like-minded industry leaders, they're more than willing to provide their advice. I think one of the things I found through my career journey is people are always willing to share their wisdom and their career path and their advice with others. And you take great pride in knowing that you played a small role in someone else's success. And I know that the industry is in dire need of more people. So the more that they can mentor the youth to enter the field, the more everyone and communities are going to be able to grow. So I definitely encourage them to even just listen to your Tools of the Trade podcast to hear more from the industry leaders, because you're attracting some really great companies and leaders within the sector that I think we can all learn a lot from. Even if you're not in the industry and want to learn what the industry is like, I definitely encourage you to tune in to Tools of the Trade, and then follow Colin on social media. He has a lot of great posts and a lot of great advice for his followers. But before we wrap up, because I feel like we can talk for a very long time, I want to make sure that I've answered all the questions that were asked. So there was a question from Maria. How can the average person help to break stigma around working in construction?
Yeah, so my answer to that is you have to be the one to do that. So what I mean by that is, as cheesy as it sounds, you have to be the change you want to see in the world. You have to respect the trades yourself. So first, you have to be the person that understands who these people are and that they're just like everybody else and they shouldn't be treated any lesser than you. Like I've heard a story recently where a friend of mine that owns a construction company was going in to do some renovation work on a client's home. And this client was an accountant. And they thought because I'm an accountant and I have a quote unquote white collar job that I get to treat you like my slave around here. And that's how it's going to go on this job. So you have to first, like, you know, there's all sorts of talk about education, and there's a lot of organizations that are trying really hard to break that stigma. Unfortunately, a lot of us are all working in our own corners and we're not partnering up. And I think we need to do a better job of that, as coming together as a team. But you have to be that change, and it's simple. If somebody you see is you know, disrespecting a tradesperson, or you know, laughs at what a construction person does for a living, you have to be the one to step up and put your foot down and say, do you realize that they're just like you and I? You know, there's no difference. Because I don't think we're at a place where you're going to educate it into people yet. And there's going to be the people that won't get it. But if you're out there and you're pushing for the trades yourself, then people are going to buy into that. And I think that would be my recommendation, is to break the stigma. You have to be breaking it yourself, and you have to be leading the charge, and just showing that. And if you're caught in a conversation like that, or you witness something, you have to be the one to step up and help break that down. And it's a collaborative effort. It's not one person or one organization or one program that's going to solve it. It's just over time. More instances, unfortunately, like COVID-19, where we're deemed as essential, it's just people will get it over time.
You touch on the collective aspect, and that we need to partner together to really change the perception and the stigma that's out there. And I think that that's one of the ways that you and I really were able to establish a strong relationship, a professional relationship between Build a Dream and Tools of the Trade. Because I remember after the interview, even though I'm not a tradesperson, I have a university degree. I'm about to finish my master's at the University of Windsor.
Shout out to that, by the way.
Pardon me?
I said shout out to that, by the way.
I appreciate it. 4 weeks and I'm almost at the finish line. But I really appreciated when you said, thank you for advocating for our industry, and thank you for the work that you do. Because oftentimes, and more often than I would like, we often hear, well, you're not a tradesperson. Why are you advocating for the industry? It's not authentic when you're out there speaking about the industry. And I feel that collectively we need tradespeople and non-tradespeople to come together and say, listen, there are all these different pathways where youth could truly succeed, and it's for everyone. And my lived experiences brought me to advocating for people to succeed. And I am like you when I think of be the change you want to see in this world, and we all play a role in that change. So I really appreciated you not only saying, collectively, we're going to make a change happen, but you also offered your support, your background and experience in running a podcast to help Build a Dream launch our first podcast, Dare to Dream. So I just think, Colin, you set out to run a podcast to support people in the industry, but I have to say, from personal experience, you are supporting so many others beyond the construction industry to think bigger and to really advocate for more change, me included. So I just really want to give you a huge shout out and thank you for everything that you're doing for youth, for the construction industry, and for Build a Dream, because you have been such a wealth of knowledge for our organization. And Dare to Dream podcast is launching as quickly as it is because of your support. So keep doing what you're doing. And
thank you.
For anyone that's tuning in, I highly encourage you to follow Tools of the Trade, to follow Colin Toop, and any of those industry leaders in the construction sector. Reach out to Colin because you want to get on his podcast and share your journey so that we can get more youth and more women into the industry. Colin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Had some great feedback. People were loving your wisdom. I'm not surprised. So I'd love to have you back maybe in a month or so, because I think we could talk about a lot of other topics that we didn't get to
absolutely
a little bit deeper.
Yeah. And just if anybody out there is listening and they they need to chat, like they've got a problem, or they need just an ear about construction, give me a shout. You can reach me on all of the social platforms. I think probably the best way to get me is going to be LinkedIn. So Colin Toop on LinkedIn, or you can search Tools of the Trade on LinkedIn. My website, toolspodcast.com. You can get me there as well through the contact form at the back, but it's more of a roundabout way. So, I'm everywhere on social media at Tools Podcast or at Colin Toop. So just feel free to reach out to me there, and, I'd be more than happy to chat.
Amazing. And what we're going to do, Colin, is everything that we talked about, even some of the tips you provided, we're going to put it all together in one post, share it on all of our social media channels, tag you in it. That way people can, when they're following up and listening to this episode at a later date or later time, they can actually reach out, get the tools and resources that you had mentioned during your conversation with me. So I really appreciate it and look forward to chatting with you more in the coming weeks.
Yeah, you as well, and take care of yourself. Everybody listening, thank you for leaving comments. I scrolled through them. It's interesting. I've never been on Facebook Live, so very cool. I'm going to have to do it myself. And thanks again, guys. I really appreciate it.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. And stay tuned for tomorrow. I'm going to be talking with Jonathan 𝘲𝑒𝑎𝑠, a board member of Build-A-Dream, but also the president of Laval Tool and the past president of the Canadian Association of Mold Makers. And he's going to talk about what his industry is doing to help support the frontline workers in healthcare and how manufacturing has shifted from the automotive sector into the health sector during the pandemic. So I can't wait to speak to Jonathan, and thank you so much for everyone that tuned in today, and I will see you tomorrow. Okay, bye, Colin.
See you guys. Bye.